So, welcome to Kickstarting Your Climate Job Search, where we're going to break down some of the silos, some of the verbiage, the lingo, and again, ultimately give all of you the tools that you need to optimize your job search and hopefully land you a job in climate. If you've been at previous events by me or any other events in climate, I know a lot of you said you're in the interview stages, so you likely know a little bit about the climate job search. This event is meant to be a starting point. So you may know some of the stuff, think that is perfectly okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a refresher. And oftentimes I found that a lot of people who are well into their climate job search didn't start with some of the basics, and that's ultimately hurting them. So even if you are at a later stage, I do still believe that there's going to be some relevant information in here for you today. Quick reminder that we are in a meeting, not a webinar. That means you can put your camera on if you want. You can see each other if you want. Also means you can unmute yourself. That's going to be great when it comes time for questions. But the format for today is going to be 40 or so minutes of me giving a presentation and then 20 minutes for questions. So please try to keep yourself muted if you're not trying to talk, because everyone will be able to hear you. So awesome. With that, we can go ahead and kick things off. Hello, my name is Natalie Lavery. I am the marketing lead at Climate People. I'll get into who Climate People is in a bit, but just kind of wanted to give you a quick rundown on my background. So hopefully this can serve as a little bit of foreshadowing of some of the tools that I'm going to give you today and how I put them into practice and how it led me to where I am. So I have a background in grassroots environmental advocacy. I started my career working for Greenpeace and the Sierra Club and absolutely loved having that environmental impact. But boots on the ground campaigning was just not the best use of my skill set. So left that space, got a job in big tech, and really liked the work that I was doing, but really missed that environmental impact that I just mentioned. That was kind of the first time that I discovered climate tech and the world of climate tech and how you don't have to be an environmentalist or a scientist to get a job in this space. You can be a marketing professional, you can be a sales professional, whatever it may be, and still get a job in climate. And that kind of just opened my eyes to the possibility. And honestly, have not looked back since. I came across my role on LinkedIn, messaged the founder, and ended up creating my own job. That is something that seems a little bit foreign if you've never applied to a job in climate, but that is something that I hear all the time of how people land jobs. So we'll get into that a little bit more, but that's how I got my job. So definitely have lived from this experience and can talk to it a little bit more. Awesome. So meet Climate People. Climate People is a climate recruitment agency. We operate as any traditional recruitment agency would. However, we only work with companies that are working on a climate solution. So if a company is working on a climate solution and they have hiring needs, they'll hire Climate People, we'll work on their jobs, and then we'll collaborate with job seekers like yourselves to hopefully fill some of those positions. That's Climate People's recruitment model. We were a really small team. If you looked at our website, we only have around 14 or so jobs posted at any time. We want to have more of an impact. We want to help more than 14 people get a job in climate. So that's kind of where my job comes in. I host events like this. I give people tools, resources, have one-on-one chats, and so on and so forth to hopefully get more people working in climate and really act on our mission of mobilizing a workforce transition to climate. Cool. So if you have been in the climate job search for some time, you've likely seen this stat. But according to Terra.do, which is a climate education platform, highly recommend checking them out if you have not already. But they say that we need 100 million people working in climate by 2030 to address the demands of the climate crisis. So that means that 99% of the people who will be working in climate by 2030 have not yet begun. So if you're here today, even if you're just learning about climate jobs an hour ago, you're still ahead of almost 100% of the people. So this is kind of the foundation for everything today. There's a demand for you, and it's all about kind of fitting yourself within that demand and positioning yourself in the best way possible. So starting with the basics, if you've never heard of climate, you likely don't know this. Again, I know a lot of you do, so I'll kind of go through this a little bit quickly. But what is climate tech? There are countless definitions out there, but essentially any technology that works to reduce, remove, or reshape the harms of carbon emissions can be considered a climate tech product. Those technologies fall into three different categories. You have emissions reduction, climate adaptation, and carbon removal. Emissions reduction is as it sounds, any technology that's reducing emissions. So that's your electric vehicles, your solar panels, kind of all of that. Climate adaptation says the effects of climate change are already here. You must be resilient in the face of them. So that's your drones that can put out wildfires, your flood proofing, your fireproofing, all of those technological innovations. Lastly, carbon removal. Again, as it sounds, any technology that is removing carbon from the air. So when we think of climate jobs, we think of a job in any one of these categories. So say you work for a solar company, the person who's designing the solar panels, the person who's installing them, person who's maintaining them, person who's selling them, person who's marketing them, so on and so forth. All of those people are working in climate tech jobs. So when we think of climate, I encourage you to think of climate not as this niche industry. A lot of people think of, like I did, I need to go work for an environmental nonprofit to be a climate job. I need to be a scientist, an environmentalist. Rather, I encourage you to think of climate as a reframing of the entire global economy. So we do all of these things. We have industry, we have transportation, we have food, we have buildings, so on and so forth. But when we think of climate, we need to think of viewing all of those industries from a climate lens. So transportation, instead of gas-powered cars, can we enhance public transportation? Can we do EVs? Can we work on battery innovation, et cetera? All of those things. So essentially, again, reframing the global economy with a climate lens. So why? Why are we thinking about all of this? As you likely know, if you're here, carbon dioxide levels are the highest in human history. At this rate, we have less than 10 years before experiencing the even greater catastrophic effects of climate change. I'm not putting this in here to scare you. I think we all kind of know the reality. The reason I put this slide in here is to really show the opportunity. When things get dire, demand goes up, and then product market fit also rises alongside that, and that just leads to more job opportunity. Reflecting back on the Terra.do slide that I had earlier, there's a demand, and it's only going to continue to be more of a demand. Another thing that I want to quickly note on climate jobs is all I just described about a climate job is when we think of climate tech jobs, kind of leaving your current job to get a job in climate. That's not feasible for everyone, and that's totally okay. You could also have a climate job by making your job a climate job, which was coined by Project Drawdown, essentially saying corporations hold a lot of power. So we need these corporations to care about the climate, about the planet. So even if you don't want to leave a job and get a job at a climate startup, there's still some things that you can do within your current organization to make that job more climate oriented. Can give you some more resources on this if you're interested. But the meat of today's discussion is going to be on what I talked about first, about getting a job in climate tech. Okay, awesome. So a quick look at some of the funding and what's kind of going on with climate. If you were looking for a job last year, I'm sure you've realized that last year was a pretty rough year to look for a job. It was a pretty rough year to hire for a job. The job market just was not looking very great. So this is a little bit of what we predict happened. So industry growth limitations is kind of one of the first things. So growth in climate was restricted last year due to layoffs in other industries. So big tech took a big hit last year. So that meant more job seekers looking for a job in climate, and every other industry is really just infiltrated by a lot more people than we've seen. Also, hiring concerns. A lot of climate companies are startups. That means that these founders have never really hired before. They don't have experience in hiring. They had a lot of fear of making the wrong decision because the stakes were so high in terms of everything that happened last year. Companies that had planned growth had to reduce headcount due to these funding freezes, leading to extensive hiring processes. So you probably saw a lot of jobs that were posted, but they were looking for a unicorn candidate, someone that didn't exist. They had no real intention of hiring anyone unless the perfect person came across their door. So kind of some false advertising was going on. Another thing is diverse industry needs. Climate sectors, as I just said, is kind of a reframing of the entire global economy. So that means it covers a wide span of industries and needs and different role types. So it's really hard to look at software, for example, and be like, software solved this. When you're looking at climate, you're looking at software. hardware, a mix of both, hybrid solutions, a little bit of everything. So it's really hard to pinpoint those unique skills and recruiting processes for all of that. And then lastly, application overload. Last year, we saw an increase in AI tools. There are tools where you can submit your resume and it automatically apply to 100+ jobs for you. LinkedIn's easy apply feature. It was really easy to apply to jobs. So that meant that companies were getting thousands of applications and no one person can go through that many. So that's a quick look at everything that went wrong last year. I find that sometimes going over what happened and putting rhyme to reason makes it a little bit less daunting. And you can kind of understand that maybe it wasn't just you, a lot of other people were feeling that same pain. So what can we expect in 2024? 2024 is already seeing increased funding prospects. So that means that there's going to be more money in climate. That means that there's going to be more jobs. People are going to be less scared to make the wrong decisions and actually start to hire more and hopefully up the job postings and the hiring that we're seeing. So things are looking good already. For hiring managers, we're going to encourage them to be more strategic. I know this isn't directly relevant to you, but sometimes applying some reverse psychology to the way that hiring managers think can help you optimize your job search. So we're encouraging them to leverage their networks, kind of be more realistic with their hiring needs and so on and so forth. And then job seekers, this is going to be, again, the meat of today's discussion. Climate job search requires a really strategic job approach. So I'm going to encourage all of you to take some of these steps to heart today and really apply them. Cool. So with that, we can get into the 5 steps to landing a job in climate. This is what we're going to go over today. We're going to dive into the first now, which is laying the foundation. Perfect. So to lay the foundation for your job search, this may sound a little bit intuitive, and I guarantee you that 90% of job seekers just skip over this part, and don't recommend doing that. This is probably one of the most important parts to getting a job in climate. So first, do an in-depth evaluation of your strengths and weaknesses. Look at roles before applying to any. Just go to Climate Tech List, go to Climate Base, go to any climate job board, and outline some of the roles that you could see yourself having. What's out there, what skills do you have, what's applicable. Look at some stretch roles if you're currently in an associate position. Look at manager positions, see how you would need to upskill in order to get to that position. But when we think of a climate job search, very high level, it's a 3-step process. First is to learn, then is to network, and then is to leverage. So first, learn. Dive into climate solutions. And do that by joining different Slack groups. I'm going to send over a list of resources after this, but my top 2 recommendations are to join Work on Climate. It's a Slack group with thousands of members in it. Poke around in there, meet people, learn about the different solutions. And then MCJ Collective. This one is $100 a year. So there is a price point. If that's something you can afford, highly recommend. If not, stick with Work on Climate. But learn as much as you can about climate solutions and pinpoint 3 solutions that interest you. So it could be, I really am interested in battery innovation. I like vertical farming. I like solar panels. Whatever it is, find 3 climate solutions that are really interested to you. Then from there, start networking within those 3 solutions. So try to meet people, try to make connections. Work on Climate has different sub-communities for different roles types and different climate solutions. So join those. And again, try to meet people within those climate solutions. And then lastly, you're going to apply for jobs or go about getting jobs. We'll go into that a little bit later on, but then leverage those connections that you just made. So usually when you think of a traditional job search, you think of applying for jobs. Think of climate, think of these 3 steps. We'll go into them a little bit more in detail, but that is the overarching theme. Learn, network, leverage. Perfect. Next up is to know why you want a job. Again, sounds a little bit intuitive, but if you don't sit down and do this in the beginning, it's going to be a lot harder to do it in the end. The whole point of today is me encouraging you to narrow down your search, have intentions for where you're trying to go, kind of see the end destination before you even begin. So the whole entire job process is about why you are the one for a job. As we talked about, there's been an influx of applications. So it's you versus 800 people. Why do they want to hire you? You need to know why that is. So your why should consist of why you want a job in climate. So that's reflecting back on the learn phase. What is it that makes you want a job in climate? Is it that you've always cared about the planet since you were a kid? You got a green roof. You saw the effects of natural disasters. Whatever it is, be unique. Why do you want a job in climate? The next part of your why is why do you want to work on this specific climate solution? So again, you pinpointed your 3 solutions you're interested in. If you're interested in solar, what about solar is interesting to you? Make sure you know why. And then third is why do you want to work at this company? Why do you want this job? What is it about this unique company, this unique solution or role that piques your interest? So you need to know all 3 of those things before you're applying to these roles. This why should live on the objective statement of your resume. It should be on your cover letter. It should be on your LinkedIn. And every time you kickstart a networking conversation and someone says, okay, tell me about yourself, list your why. Hi, my name is Natalie. I am really passionate about climate solutions because I grew up in this town where whatever it may be, list your why. Again, make sure you actually have this written out and you can continue to build on it. It can evolve, but make sure you're understanding why you're here in the first place. Next step is to optimize your resume. As you likely know, your resume is your first impression that anyone is getting of you. It's really important to keep it concise. There's no reason your resume should be over 2 pages. If you're having a hard time keeping your resume under 2 pages, it's okay to show career progression. So you have 20 years of experience and your first 5 years of your career were at 3 different entry-level roles. You can group those into one and just say early level career achievements and then move on. You don't need to include everything, only include the relevant information. You also really need to optimize your resume for keywords. They say that 72% of jobs or of resumes are never reviewed by a real human. They're filtered through an applicant tracking system. If your resume has the keywords that match the job description, it's getting flagged and then a human is going to look at it. So make sure you're optimizing it for keywords. A great way to do this is to copy and paste the job description, put it into ChatGPT, any other AI tool, say, pull the keywords from this resume. It'll give you a list of keywords. Make sure those are on your resume. If you don't have the skill, obviously don't include it, but definitely try to incorporate as many of those as you can. Also, it's super important to quantify your impact. I always say, don't tell me what you did, show me what you did. I have some examples of this, but make sure every bullet point is quantifying something and it kind of proves a point. It's not just filling up space. This one here about customizing it for each role you apply to is super, super, super important. You can't pull the keywords from the job description if you are not updating it for every role you apply to. Lastly, climate projects experience and cohorts all definitely deserve a space. If you're applying to a job in climate, they want to know why you were interested in climate. So make sure you list any climate experience, even if it's just a volunteer work or a project that you worked on. Perfect. So here are some resume examples of when I say quantify your impact. So keep it concise, keep it technical, and keep it quantifiable. So this first bullet point here is design, tested, and built a new product that improved application of flow efficiency by 57%. So you're showing what you did, and then the bold part here is what was the impact? Why does it matter? What did I do that had a greater impact on the company's KPIs? Cool. Supervised a team of 5 by leading a robust software upgrade, which increased our team's capacity tenfold. Again, you're getting the gist here. Not just showing me what you did, you're showing me exactly how you did it. I'll also send a link to this slide deck, so no need to write this all down if you want to reflect back on it a little bit later. Awesome. So then the next step is to optimize your LinkedIn profile. So on your LinkedIn profile, automatically, if you just leave it at the default settings, it has your name, and then it has under it on your headline, it says your job title at your company. So mine would say marketing lead at Climate People, but that's not doing anything for me. Reflecting back on keywords absolutely deserve a space on your LinkedIn as much as they do your resume, and your headline is a great place to have those keywords. So I'm going to encourage you to edit that automatic headline and change it to something that's going to work for you. A great formula to follow is to have 3 to 8 keywords and then your value add. I have some examples of this. But a great way to do this is when you were browsing different opportunities out there and the first step of laying the foundation, and you're looking at different role types, I encourage you to find 20 to 30 job descriptions that interest you. So tag those 20 to 30 job descriptions, copy and paste them, and go to wordcloud.com. So wordcloud.com, paste all of those 20 to 30 job descriptions into WordCloud, and it's going to pull keywords for those 20 to 30 job descriptions. And those are your keywords for your LinkedIn profile. It's not tailored to one role like a resume would be. It's tailored to 30 or so roles in an area that you're interested in. So take those keywords, take 3 to 8 of them, and then add them to your LinkedIn headline. Go over some examples, find your keywords, and then your value add. So what about you is important? What sets you apart from the other 800 applicants? Again, we'll go over some examples in a second. Another great way to stuff keywords to your LinkedIn profile is skills tags. On your LinkedIn, at the bottom of your profile, you can add skills. Most people have 4 or 5. You can have 50. So I encourage you to think of 50 skills that you have. Again, reflecting back on those keywords, this is a great place to add those. Obviously, don't put anything you don't have, but you definitely have 50 skills. Make sure you're filling up all of those. Be active on LinkedIn, show your availability. You can set your LinkedIn profile to be open to work. That doesn't mean you have to have the banner. I know you've seen the open to work banner on someone's profile. If you want to do that, sure. But if you're currently employed, you probably shouldn't do that. But on the back end of your profile, you can set it so that you're still open to work. And then that way, only recruiters outside of your organization can see this. So yeah, definitely recommend doing that. I have way more insights on LinkedIn profiles that I can send your way if you're interested. If so, feel free just to drop me a note on LinkedIn and I can send that over to you. Perfect. So here are those headline examples that I promised. This first one, the blue is the keywords, and then the black is the impact statement about why they're different. So data scientist, data mining, experienced in Tableau and Python, enhanced machine learning prototypes by 38%. Software engineer, database development, analytics manager at HubSpot. HubSpot is a notable company, so they chose to include it here. Think that's totally okay. It adds to their profile. Increase automation levels by 55%. You kind of get the gist here. Point being, make sure you have keywords and make sure you have that impact statement. Perfect. So the next step is going into networking. So we really talked about learn, and now we're going to talk about networking. So they say around 60 to 70% of jobs are filled through networking. I would argue that that number is even higher for climate. I can count on my way past the number of fingers I have, the number of people that I know personally who have gotten a job through networking, myself included. I'm going to encourage you to spend 80% of your time networking and only 20% of your time applying to jobs. I know that sounds a little bit backwards if you're looking for a job, but I guarantee you your chances of getting a job by networking are far higher than they are by applying to jobs. So as I've touched on a lot to this point, climate is a very connected community. It's a little bit of a niche space. People know each other. People are kind of in tune in the same areas. They're in the same communities. Really, a lot of resources start to get shared. People start to know each other. So use that to your advantage. So I've already talked about a few of these, but I'd highly recommend joining climate communities. A lot of these climate communities live on Slack. So Work on Climate is one, MCJ, Terra.do, Tofu, Climate Action Tech, or CAT. The list goes on. Find a few communities that you're interested in, join them, and really leverage them. So yeah, that's a great place to meet people. The connections are already there. MCJ Collective has a weekly coffee chat that you can just automatically join, and then their bot sets you up with someone with a curated connection. It's super easy to meet people. So that is going to be a gold mine for finding your networking connections. Another thing with networking is to create a timeline and concrete goals. Networking can seem really daunting if you just say, okay, this month I need to meet 40 people. And again, this is a wide goal, a stretch goal. I don't know what you have the capacity for, but be realistic, set goals. Saying 40 a month seems a lot more scary than saying 2 a day, 2 every weekday. So whatever it is, set goals, set timelines, make a lasting impression. So if you are reaching out to someone and asking for a networking conversation, you are in charge of guiding that conversation. So Make sure you're looking at their LinkedIn profile, you're looking at their background, their company, having a list of questions, whatever it may be. Be prepared to make a lasting impression, come with ideas, resources. And then lastly, when you in that conversation, make sure you ask them for referrals. Say, based on our conversation, who else in your network do you recommend that I talk to? That way you're getting your next conversation already set up for you. Again, your goal is to remain niche here. You chose your 3 solutions that you're interested in. Make sure you're networking within those solutions. It's way easier to make a name for yourself within the EV space than it is within climate. So if you're sticking, CAT stands for Climate Action Tech. But anyways, if you're sticking to those solutions, it's going to be way easier to meet people, make curated connections, kind of go down that path. Here are some great formulas that I recommend that you follow. If you've already applied for a job, I would send a networking connection that looks like this. Send an email that says, I applied to this job. I'm interested in the company's climate mission for this reason. I'm qualified for the job for this reason. You've already thought through your quantifiable impact statements, include one there, and then a call to action that says, I'd love to talk more. I get it. You're still spending 20% of your time applying to jobs. So you still need to have this formula. You still need to follow up on those job applications. But the second formula here is going to lead to way higher response rates. I guarantee you. It's more just, I want to get to know you, a common connection. Hey, I both saw that we're members of Work on Climate. We attended the same university. We're both interested in the built environment. Whatever it is, draw some connection. It can be very broad if you can't find something that's more niche. Why you want to talk to them? What do you hope to learn from them? You're exactly where I want to be in 5 years. I'd love to learn how you got to where you are. What you can offer them. This is the one that a lot of people get stuck on, but I guarantee you it's going to be super important. When you think of networking, a lot of people think of it as a transactional thing, like this first formula. I applied to a job. I'd love to get something from you. But what I encourage you to think of networking, I encourage you to think of it as a relationship, a symbiotic relationship. I want to get this from you, but I'm going to offer you this. That way, they're going to want to talk to you. They're going to want to learn from you because they don't feel like you're just messaging them because you want a job. So what can you offer them? It can be as simple as, I'm just getting introduced to climate. I have fresh eyes on your product and would love to learn or show you how it's conveyed to the outside eye. It could be anything that you can offer them. Just make sure you're offering them something. And then again, a call to action about their availability. Awesome. This is kind of the hidden job market is what I'm referring to when I say getting a job through networking. So this job is never posted. You meet someone and then you create your job, kind of similar to how I explained I got my current role. So this is all about turning your networking into jobs. So the key here is to understanding your skill set and market mapping. So this goes back to what we talked about when we said understanding your why and laying the foundation for your job search. You have a really good idea of your skill set, your strengths, your weaknesses in the sectors that you're interested in. So you're going to look for companies that kind of fit that mold. So you're not looking for job postings, you're looking for opportunities. So I'm in marketing. I'm really good at content. I'm really good at communities, and I'm good at events. So those are my 3 things. I'm really interested in supporting catalyst sectors. So not a direct technology, but nonprofits, climate recruitment agencies, marketing agencies. That's kind of my niche. And then I'm going to look for companies that fit that mold. A great way to do this is to go to VC firms. I will drop a link in the chat to Climate Tech VC accelerators. They have an entire list of all of their climate accelerators. I would recommend checking this out and then going to one of these accelerators. So for example, one of the first ones on here is Activate. Activate is going to be focused on science, so hard science. So if that's a solution that you're interested in, go to Activate. They have a portfolio of companies that kind of fit that mold. That's where you can find the companies. So you're kind of doing a market map of the companies where you think you can make an impact. So this first step is just pinpointing those companies. Next is you're going to learn how to articulate that impact. So what sets you apart? How could you help this company? So if you're in marketing and they have a really bad website and you notice that they just don't have much marketing help, that would be your launching point. I have experience designing websites. I have experience doing this. I could help with this. Being able to explain with numbers how you could help this company. And then you're going to have examples of this, and then you're going to reach out to the company. Last note here is timing is important. So look at the funding stage of the company. Crunchbase is a great resource to do that. If you are in the hard sciences, if you're an engineer, if you're in a highly technical person, they're likely going to need your skill set in the early stages of the company. So you can be looking at like pre-seed, seed companies. Whereas if you're in more of a supporting role, so if you're in sales, if you're in marketing, if you're in product, whatever it may be, you're going to want to look for later stage companies. Those super early stage companies aren't really thinking about marketing quite yet. So look for later stage companies. Again, networking conversations can really help you pinpoint this. You can ask these questions. You can ask when they're thinking about hiring marketing people. It's not taboo to do. Cool. So here are some examples of people who got jobs through the hidden job market and kind of how they went about it. So these are people climate people worked with. I made them anonymous, for obvious reasons. But the first one is a generalist with a focus. This person had experience in customer success and process improvement. They were super knowledgeable and passionate about cities and buildings waste and then sustainable mobility. So those are their sectors. They focused their search on smaller companies. Since they were a generalist, they knew that they could join early stage and kind of help them get their feet under them and get their product a little bit further along. So that's what they did. They narrowed down their search to those types of companies, that funding stage, and then they started reaching out, having those conversations, and they ended up getting a job, even though the job wasn't posted. The second one I titled Unsolicited Advice because it kind of fits the mold a little bit, but this person didn't even have a resume. I still recommend you have a resume. Don't throw your resume out. But this person didn't have a resume. Instead, they dedicated all of their time to researching companies and messaging the founders with their suggestions to improve their product. So they're a product manager. They found companies that they knew they could make an impact. They sent a message directly to the founder, said, I came across your company. I noticed this about your product. If I were in your shoes, I'd do X, Y, and Z. This led to an 80% response rate, and 50% of those 80 resulted in engaging conversations about opportunities. So this is a great way to go if you have the time. I wouldn't just send a message that's just roasting a company. That's not going to get you anywhere. But I would definitely include some advice and some really targeted pieces of advice that would be applicable to the company, and then ask if they want to talk more. These work really well. As we touched on, a lot of climate companies are startups. Their founders are highly technical people. If you are hiring in a product role or a more supporting role, they likely don't know much about that position. It sounds a little bit weird, but when you interview at a larger company, if you're interviewing for marketing, you're likely getting interviewed by a CMO who knows exactly everything that you did, what you hope to do, and can really vet you. Whereas, again, these companies, a lot of these founders have never done marketing in their life. They don't really know what questions to ask. So when you're having these conversations, you're showing them the impact that you could have. You're showing them why marketing is important, why product is important, and then you are doing that for them. So they're really envisioning you in that role. So if they need that help now, you're going to be the first person to come to their mind. If they need that help later, again, you're going to be the first person to come to their mind, and then they're going to reach out to you. So that was a lot. I'm going to leave that here. And again, we'll have questions. So feel free to ask me questions when we get to that, or add me on LinkedIn and we can kind of go through that a little bit more. Here's a template that I recommend that you follow if you are reaching out via the hidden job market. So recently discovered the company. I'm truly impressed by the work. My longstanding interest, this is where your why is coming in this climate solution, combined with my experience in whatever it may be, has fueled my excitement to connect. I was wondering if you had 20 minutes to tell me about the company and your role. I'd love to delve deeper into building on your insights while talking on something that you can offer them. With experience in blank, I have done this. I eagerly await your response and the opportunity. This way, again, you're showing what you want to learn, why you're interested, what you can offer, and then a call to action about having a call. This way, in the marketing or in the networking call, you can talk through some ideas you had, some suggestions. Again, come to that call prepared. This is just the first step, but this template will likely lead to way higher response rates than, hey, love to connect. Hey, I applied to a job, love to talk. This way, you're actually offering them something and it makes it worth their time. Cool. So we still have 20% of our time is dedicated to applying to jobs. So if you're applying to jobs and you're just submitting an application, again, you're probably not going to get a response. You might if you get lucky, but that's going to be luck. The key to applying to jobs is to follow up. So as soon as you click submit on that resume, you need to try to figure out who the person that is going through those resumes is going to be. I would go to LinkedIn. I would go to the people tab on their company website and try to deduce who you think the hiring manager is going to be. If you're applying for an engineering role and there is a VP of engineering, that's likely going to be your person. If there's a recruiter, that is also likely going to be your person. So take some deducing, but try to pinpoint who you think the hiring manager is going to be. Send them a message, make it specific. Hey, I applied to this job. Make it personal. I care about this climate solution because of this reason. Here are some numbers about why I'm qualified. Love to chat more about it. So definitely don't just apply to a job without following up. Another note with applying to jobs is, as I touched on earlier and what's happening in 2023, a lot of jobs are posted because these hiring managers are looking for unicorn candidates. They know that this person doesn't exist. They're just listing every single qualification under the sun that they would love to have. So if you are looking at a job and being like, don't have that, and not applying, you're not going to get a job and they're not going to get any candidates. So don't use the job description to disqualify yourself. Rather, use the job description as a starting point. Obviously, you should have some of the qualifications listed. Don't just apply to a job that you're wildly not qualified for. But again, don't use it to disqualify yourself. If you have the majority of the qualifications, still apply. They're likely not going to get that person that they wrote down anyways. Quality over quantity. We kind of already touched on this with resumes, but make sure you're updating your resume for every job you're applying to. If there's an option for a cover letter, put a cover letter. Make sure you're putting time into this. And then, of course, as I've already touched on, as soon as you click submit, follow up and try to get a conversation in the books. Last step, again, seems intuitive, but you would be shocked at how many people forget to do this. Leverage your connections. You spent so much time networking that if you have any connections at the company, send them a note. Say, hey, I see you're connected to the hiring manager at whatever company. Love if you could put a good word in for me. This kind of goes back to networking and how it's really important to keep up with your connections. Don't just have a 30-minute conversation with someone and then never speak to them again. If you're going to have a conversation with someone, if you're going to put the work in to network with them, make sure you're maintaining that connection. So it can be as simple as, hey, I know when we talked a few weeks ago, we discussed the adoption of heat pumps. I came across this article and I thought of you. It could be as simple as that. And then you're maintaining that conversation. So when it comes time for the big ask, you don't feel awkward. You've offered them things. They've helped you. Now you can say, would you mind putting a good word in for me? I have a networking tracking template that I put together. I'll drop that in the chat in a second, but it's really helpful to kind of keep notes on all your discussions so you can remember who said what, who did what. I know they tend to blur together. Awesome. So interview tips. If you get an interview, that is awesome. But again, it kind of goes back to everything we've been talking about so far is you have to prepare. You must go into this interview being able to prove that you're capable of doing the job. So research the companies and the interviewers, reflect back on your why that you've already outlined, ask questions that are not answered in the job description. So they're going to ask you, do you have any questions for me? Make sure you have some thought-provoking questions that really demonstrate that you're knowledgeable about the position and that you can't answer them by just looking at the job description again. Show your value add. Have examples for every point on your resume, be able to bring every point in your resume to life with a story. And then, of course, send a follow-up after the email or a follow-up email after the interview. Be unique, be enthusiastic, and personalize it to every interviewer that you met with. Here's an example of a great follow-up. Again, I won't go over this for time's sake, but I will share the link to this slide deck if you would like to take a look at this after. So if you got an offer, that's awesome. Definitely a few tips here. Again, go through them pretty quickly for time's sake. I want to make sure we have time for questions, but try to let them make the first offer first. So you don't risk saying a number that's too low. Salary is important. However, a lot of smaller climate companies compensate for lower salaries with flexible work, equity, more vacation. Again, before you get to this stage, make sure you're honest with yourself about what you want and what you can kind of sway with and what you won't sway with, so that you can go into this stage knowing all of this. If you have to give a number, sometimes you're put on the spot where they ask, what salary are you looking for? Try to avoid providing a wide range. If you do that, they're going to go with the lower range. So never mention a number that's lower than you will take. If you do, that's what they're going to offer you, and you're going to probably get stuck with that. So say 110 to 115. If you really don't want less than 110, don't say 110, because again, that is likely what you are going to get offered. Quick note on AI, it seems to be everything that everyone's talking about these days. It can help you with your job search in a lot of ways. It can help you write a resume, search for climate job trends, prepare for interviews, network with industry professionals, research companies, so on and so forth. As AI becomes more prevalent, keywords will only become more important. So make sure those keywords that we talked about earlier are on all of your application materials, and don't use AI as a crutch. Please, please, please do not go to ChatGPT and say, write me a resume. It will be absolutely terrible. But you can say, hey, ChatGPT, I have this skill set. This is the impact I made. The keywords are this. Help me formulate this bullet point. And then that's how I would leverage it. Again, don't use it as a crutch. Use it as a resource. Perfect. Last thing here is this is not your traditional job search. If you've gained anything from the last 45 minutes, it's that the climate job search is very different than any other job search. And I know change can be daunting and scary and hard to navigate, but everyone else is going through the same thing. It is hard to get a job in climate, but if you follow some of these tidbits that I offered today, it will be a lot easier. Everyone gets rejected. I would try to reframe those rejections as stepping stones leading you to your next job. Again, reflect back on that 100 million stat. We need 100 million people working in climate. That's a lot of people, and 99% of those people are not here yet. So you are ahead of the curve, even if it may not feel like it in this very moment. I'm here as a resource. I would encourage you to add me on LinkedIn. I'll drop my LinkedIn handle in a second. I'm here to answer questions. The climate community is really open. We all know that the more people we have working on this in this space, the brighter all of our futures will be, at the risk of sounding very cliche, but it really does ring true, and we need all hands on deck. So you are in the right space. There is a job for you, and I promise following these tips will help you on your way. Perfect. If you learned anything today, if you want to post about it on LinkedIn, an example here from Emily, just say, I learned this, I learned whatever it may be, and you tag climate people with the hashtag breaking into climate. I will do a 30-minute one-on-one coffee chat with you where we can dive into some of your unique struggles. A lot of today was talking generally about trends that apply to hundreds of people. Obviously, you're going to have a different use case. So if you post on LinkedIn, again, tag climate people, use that hashtag. I'll reach out and we can do a one-on-one coffee chat about your unique struggles. Perfect. So again, I've said this like 3 times, but I'm going to drop a lot of the links in the chat now. And while I do that, we can go ahead and move into questions. We have 15 minutes to answer any questions that you may have. Feel free to drop questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I'll call you. You can come off of mute and ask your questions that way. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to get to putting these links in the chat, and then if anyone has a question, feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand. Okay, the first link that I'm dropping is to that resume tracker that the networking tracker that I mentioned. This is a great place to track your networking conversations. Perfect. Okay, so the first question we have in the chat is, how would you approach optimizing your LinkedIn profile when your current employer, not in climate, does not know you're looking for new opportunities? Yeah, that is a great point. So this goes back to looking at on the back end of your resume, or sorry, the back end of your LinkedIn, you can select it to open to work. And then if you optimize your resume or LinkedIn for those keywords, a lot of times recruiters will be able to find you. So the way LinkedIn Recruiter works is you go to the back end, it's basically like Google as a search engine, and recruiters can type marketing, CRM experience, whatever, HubSpot, whatever it may be. And the people that have those skills are going to pop up first, and then recruiters will reach out to them, especially if their profile says that they're open to work. So I'd highly recommend doing that. That way, it doesn't really have to be climate oriented. It can still be really tangible, hard skills in whatever industry you're in. That way, it's going to be helpful. I mean, obviously, you're going to want to eventually update your like objective statement for climate, but that might be a little bit of a red flag to your employer. So I would hold off on that. And I would just stick to networking. So trying to join those communities, meeting people, kind of doing it not as publicly as you would if you weren't looking, if you weren't employed. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of a tricky question because you don't want to put a bunch of interest in climate if that's going to be a red flag to them. But again, focus on the technical skills. So optimizing your LinkedIn for that. You can still update your headline, all of that without having climate, and then doing the climate work kind of not as publicly as I said. Perfect. Emily, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead.
It is. Thank you so much for this. This is really helpful. My question is on certifications and just additional skills. So I'm transitioning from over 25 years in finance into climate, and so I'm not obviously entering at entry level, but a lot of the things, and I know some of them are fungible, but I feel like one, I just want more experience as well as building street cred with getting a
Yeah.
certification. So just curious what your thoughts are on that, and I'm willing for more education as well. I'm just not exactly where I want to go exactly, so it feels short-sighted to go put a lot of time and money and effort into something that maybe isn't what's going to be my end game. But
Yeah.
curious your thought on getting a certification, maybe small or a little bit bigger, that would be of interest still. My specific interest is in renewable energy.
Yeah, definitely. So I get this question a lot, and I think it's a really good one. There is a article by GreenBiz. I don't have it in front of me right now, but if you Google GreenBiz top 48, I think it was a really random number, sustainability certifications, I would highly recommend checking out that article because it really outlines all of the recommendations in terms of like more tangible certifications.
Yeah.
So again, if you add me on LinkedIn, I can send you the link to it. I just don't have it right now. But in terms of like cohorts, that is, I think, kind of something that would be of more value to you. So Terra, the organization that I mentioned a few times today, there's one called Climate Base. They're a job board. They also have a cohort. 1.5 is more on like sustainability, not necessarily like energy. It's more like ESG. But there's a lot of different like cohort programs out there. And the things I've heard about these cohort programs are that they do a really good job at introducing you to the climate landscape. So if you kind of find yourself in that learn phase, struggling to navigate, there's a lot of resources. You don't really know where to start. They offer like, I think most of them are like 12 weeks. So 4 months or 3-month programs that guide you through different climate solutions, different resources, different connections, different companies, speakers, a little bit of everything. And it really helps lay the framework. I don't know if it's necessarily going to like lend to a job immediately, but it would, again, really help you kind of pinpoint what you're interested in, and then also maybe help illustrate like how finance translates to climate, kind of where those jobs are. If you're finding it hard to network, there's definitely going to be some resources in there for you. So
That's great. Thank you.
those two things.
Somebody dropped the link in. I have seen that article. It was great. And I was exploring one of those. I was just curious your opinion on them. Do you consider Terra do a cohort like
Yes,
that 12-week?
their Learning for Action program. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, cool. Thank
I've
you.
heard incredible things about Terra.
Okay.
I think
I have too.
theirs is very like science-based, so it helps you kind of understand like why this industry even exists, kind of a little bit more on the background behind that. And so yeah, would recommend them for sure.
That's
I never
great.
done it
Thank
myself, but I've heard good things. Awesome. Jakob, you can go. Is it Jacob or Jakob? Cool. You might be muted if you're trying to talk and you're muted.
Hey, sorry.
There's your-
It's Jacob. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, quick question on salary. I've been applying to climate roles for the past 2 months, and I'm noticing a little bit of a pattern. This is just specifically for marketing for everyone's context. Should I be expecting salaries to be lower in climate if I'm applying right now? And if the answer is yes, should this would this apply to people in other industries so it's more applicable to people on this call? Have you noticed that?
Yeah, so I think it kind of goes back to like the stage of the company as opposed to the
Mhm.
climate industry per se. Like oftentimes with startups, which a lot of climate companies are, you're gonna see lower salaries. But again,
Yeah.
they might be compensated for equity, more flexibility. An example is one of climate people's clients actually, they were offering a lower salary than one of our candidates wanted. So they were like, okay, we can do 4-day work weeks. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of kind of flexibility, but generally speaking, yes, startups typically don't have the funds to pay, especially if you're coming from like big tech or an industry that has a lot
Right.
of money.
Yeah.
That kind of goes back to like knowing what you will settle on before starting. So if you know for a
Mhm.
fact this is the salary you want, make that clear in the beginning because you don't want to waste your time. You want to make that kind of explicitly clear. So yeah, if you're looking for a higher salary, I would look at more established climate verticals. So that's going to be
Mhm.
your energies and your transportation. So a lot of
Mhm.
times, like energy companies are larger, they can afford higher salaries. Transportation, been around for longer, same idea. So again, depend on what's important and then look later stage if that's something. And then, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it applies to all different job types. It's early stage versus later stage companies.
Yeah. And when you say energy, that's mostly solar, but then it's starting to become a little more hydrogen. And then maybe would you clump batteries, like lithium ion batteries and lead
Yeah.
acid batteries in that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, batteries can be like transportation and energy. It depends, a little bit of a blurred line
Yeah.
between there. But yeah, definitely your solar, your
Solar.
wind,
Yeah.
even utilities. A lot of utilities
Mhm.
have a little bit more making your job a climate job. A lot of like grid innovation software that's helping like kind of enhance the grid, microgrids, a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Climate Tech List is a great resource I would recommend. I can drop a link to them, but they let you like look at companies based off of the sector and the size. Yeah, they're an incredible tool. So I'd recommend Climate Tech List to help you kind of find those companies. Cool. Let's go to the chat and see which questions I have missed. During an interview, do you think that hiring managers will disqualify you if you don't use all the climate lingo when you were just entering the field? That's a great point, and this is something that I deal with on the company side quite a bit. Climate People obviously works with a lot of companies and help them optimize their hiring processes. At the same time, we're helping job seekers optimize their job searches. And when we first start working with a client, 90% of the time they say, we want tangible climate experience. We want to hire someone who has done this before. And again, reflecting back on that Terra stat of 100 million people, guarantee you that 100 million people do not have climate experience. So it really depends on kind of what role you are in. If you are in a supporting role, so if you're in marketing, sales, finance, product, likely having that tangible climate experience isn't necessarily that important. And if you can convey that your skills are transferable. So if you have experience in a B2B SaaS product, you likely should be looking at climate companies that are B2B SaaS companies. So then your skills are going to be highly transferable. You don't necessarily need that climate experience. Whereas if you're in more of like hardware, mechanical engineering, a lot of times that tangible experience is required just because you need to be able to build the product. So depends on your industry, but generally speaking, the key to compensating for not having climate experience is being able to show your transferable skills and then also be able to talk knowledgeably. So even if you don't have climate experience and you're interviewing an energy company, it's a good idea to have some sense of the lingo they use, the verbiage they use. You can get that through research, through networking conversations. don't go in completely blind, but you also are not going to be expected to know everything if you can convey that you are capable of picking it up. Kind of a long-winded answer, but that's the gist of it. Awesome. Next question that we have is, if you're trying to make a career pivot, how should you craft your LinkedIn headline? Should you include keywords for jobs you want, but don't necessarily have the skills for, or just stick to keyword skills from your previous jobs experiences? So this kind of depends. If you're looking for a role type, it can be aspirational. So say I'm a marketing associate and I want to be a marketing manager. I can put marketing manager in there because it's an aspirational job title. You're not saying you have it. If they go look at your experience section, they're going to see that you don't. I wouldn't put skills that you don't have. So I wouldn't say, I'm skilled in HubSpot if I have never opened HubSpot in my life, because that's a lie. And it kind of does look like you have that experience. So job titles can be aspirational. Skills, keywords, I would try to not make them aspirational. If that is something that you really want, there's ways to upskill without having a job. There's LinkedIn courses, there's different resources that you can upskill and get that. But I would not put it if you don't have it, because then if they reach out to you because of that, it's not going to go very far if you don't actually have it. And that's what they were looking for. Awesome. Will this presentation be viewable? Yeah, I'm going to send a follow-up email in a few hours with a link to the recording, and then also the slides and some of the other resources that I mentioned. So yeah, stay tuned for that a little bit later today. Cool. Which companies, industries in the US are willing to sponsor work visas for climate jobs? Yeah, that's a great question. So it kind of goes back to the size of the company as well and the amount of money that the company has. It's pretty expensive to sponsor someone. So I would look again at later stage companies. Again, echoing Climate Tech List, that is a great resource. I would look at later stage climate verticals. So again, that's your energy, your transportation, and then companies that have more funding, have more employees, and then they'll be more likely to sponsor. If you're looking at a 3-person startup, the likelihood is pretty low. Again, I can't speak to every company, but based off trends, that is what I've been seeing. Perfect. Next question that we have is, like Emily, I'm pivoting into climate with a great deal of experience. I'm finding that ageism is blocking my progress. Young hiring managers don't seem to want an experienced person reporting to them. Any suggestions? Yeah, that's a great point. And it's something that I hear quite a bit. I think it kind of comes down to, again, the startup world. Yes, maybe ageism is part of the problem. Again, I can't speak to every company. I've never really seen it. But what I've seen is a lot of companies are hesitant to hire executives or hire people with a lot of experience simply because of the price tag that we just talked about. A lot of times coming, and again, I don't know what industry you're coming from, if you're coming from a startup industry or if you're coming from a larger, more established industry. But what I've seen is a lot of times people coming from like Fortune 500 companies in a high level management or an executive level position trying to pivot into climate do have a bit of a harder time because these hiring managers don't, one, feel like they can't afford you. Two, they want someone to be able to kind of come in and wear a lot of hats. And a lot of times the misconception, maybe it's a misconception, is that people with a lot of experience are used to having really expensive tools. They're used to having like teams to kind of get things done. And it's almost more of like a management type of position as opposed to like scrappy boots on the ground, get things done. So if you are experiencing this, maybe those are some talking points to incorporate in your networking conversations of, even though I have this experience, my job is still getting my hands dirty. I still have a lot of experience doing X, Y, and Z. If salary is the concern, I'm okay with equity. I'm whatever it may be. Try to be a little bit transparent on your side about some of those issues. Because again, from a hiring manager standpoint, that is a concern that I've heard. And then oftentimes, like something I talk to a lot of job seekers about is being a little bit realistic. So if you are having a really hard time finding a job at this type of company you're looking at, a lot of times maybe the opportunity is just not quite there yet. A lot of industries in climate and different sectors in climate are still emerging. So a lot of role types aren't really there. Like you're going to see far more technical roles right now than you would marketing roles. And that's just kind of the nuances of the industry. You're going to see a lot more mid-level career roles than you will super entry level, super later stage career. So if you're having a hard time finding a job, it's perfectly okay to get a job in a utility company and kind of like a parallel industry to climate, still get exposed to some of the climate trends and learn without necessarily having a climate tech job. Again, that goes back to making your job a climate job or whatever it may be. If you want to drop me a message with a little bit more specifics of like your background and where you're coming from, I can help you like outline again some of the pain points from the hiring manager side and see if we can kind of work through some best practices. But again, without having more information on you specifically, that's some general advice. Cool. Got another question about the slides. Yes, they will be shared. Cool. Well, it is 11:02. Wow, time has flown by. Cool. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. Quickly, I'm going to drop 2 more links in the chat. Of course, more links to come. This is a PDF for some next steps that I'd recommend you follow leaving today's call. I made a LinkedIn learning course on a little bit more detail of everything we talked about today. I'm biased, but I would recommend checking that out. And then lastly, this is all of Climate People's future events. So go ahead and sign up for those. You're going to hear my dog barking too at the end. Awesome. Thank you everybody so much for joining me today. And I will see y'all at a future event. Bye.